Hi, welcome to Wyrd Wessex. I'm Andy Stevens, and this is my co-host, Craig Brooks.
What the?
Start as you mean to go on, man. Start as you mean to go on. I like it.
Look, this is going to be highbrow entertainment.
Yeah, so
But
if you're still here and you care what this podcast is going to be about,
hey, at this point, we don't have any listeners. We can do what we want.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah.
So, what's Wyrd Wessex about, Craig?
Well, we both have an interest in the paranormal and folklore and anything based around that area. And I think originally I posted it on Facebook that I was interested in starting a podcast. And you had a similar idea.
I just hijacked it. I did say,
yeah.
I'm going to be in it now. Are you doing it with me?
He does this a lot.
I've been thinking about doing one for a while. It was initially going to be a folklore and storytelling podcast, but UFOs are cool too, I guess. So,
UFOs, ghosts, poltergeists, black dogs,
black dogs, definitely.
Any of that, yeah. But yeah, people might have noticed that you initially started off calling it Wyrd Wessex, but it's about Wyrd.
Yeah, I'm not just mispronouncing it though.
I'm not picking you up. We're not going to start again. But it's just because the word weird derives from the Old English word word. Weird. I never know how to say that. So it's W-Y-R-D. And then for some reason the Scots change it to the modern spelling. And I think that it's kind of changed its use as well, because it used to be like meaning like what comes to pass.
I might have to get hold of an old English scholar and find out how that's supposed to be pronounced. But for the moment, we're calling it Wyrd Wessex.
I think we call it Wyrd Wessex. We're going to go with it.
We're going to go with it. So
we're going to go with it.
That's the decision.
And I should also shout out, actually, whilst I think of it, is my friend Lewis, who, when I mentioned Wyrd Wessex, is like, you're spelling it like word, right? W-Y-R-D. And I was like, we are now. So if Lewis is listening, which I think he probably will be, cheers.
Hey, that's one listener. So yeah, I mean, as Craig said, we've both been sort of interested in it for a while. I mean, speaking of UFOs, tell everyone what got you into this.
Well, there was that time I was abducted by Oh, you're not on about that one?
No. I told you, keep taking the pills and stop talking about it.
Listen, I've told you before, Wiltshire doesn't exist, all right? That's the real reason we're doing this podcast.
We'll also be covering weird conspiracy theories at some point, I think.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea. So jokes aside, I originally someone showed me an episode of the X-Files. And I was hooked pretty quickly. I mean, I used to like things like Quantum Leap as well, which I guess is more sci-fi, but kind of, anything around that sort of realm was what I was obsessed with, I think, in my teenage years. I'd like the collector's cards and stuff.
Hoping each next leap will be the leap home, right?
Yeah, that's the one. I don't think that's quite relevant to this. It feels kind of connected to me. I don't know.
I mean, in all seriousness, though, it's what draws you in, what inspires you. Sort of these things. They set the ball rolling. I mean, for me, I was well into Ghostbusters when I was a kid. I was really into Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
and to the point where you'll probably laugh at this. I used to want to be a vicar when I was a little kid. I used to want to be a vicar, right?
Okay.
Not because I was devout or anything like that. I did the whole church hymn thing. No, I found out they get to live next to a graveyard. And that, to my 7-year-old mind, was the coolest thing in the world. Favorite wrestler was The Undertaker. I was graveyard obsessed.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it started quite a young age, and hiding around the corner and watching horror films that were playing on my parents' TV that I probably shouldn't have been watching,
I mean, that's the other thing, is watching horror films. I mean, I can remember, I think I was about 10, and my mum told me that she'd recorded a film for me to watch. And my mum's passed now, so she's not going to get into trouble for this, but she'd recorded Nightmare on Elm Street.
Like to show a 10-year-old, man.
I remember I had a bunk bed, I can tell you that much. So I'm like, I reckon 10. Or a cabin bed, sorry, not a bunk bed. But I don't know. An odd choice, isn't it?
Craig actually got a bunk bed when he was 34.
Just last year. Finally allowed one.
You get a top or a bottom bunk.
Cabin bed, actually. It's got a sofa underneath.
I used to have a fire engine bed, but that is beside the point. But interestingly enough, that will connect to a story I'll tell later at some point about sleep paralysis.
We're going to go into sleep paralysis today. That's awesome. I've got some sleep paralysis stuff too.
I think, well, one thing we wanted to talk about was our personal stories connected to the paranormal, to all things mysterious.
That's a point, actually. I'll just interrupt you quickly because we didn't say at the beginning. So this episode is just going to be us chatting shit at each other about the paranormal and what the podcast will be about. This isn't like a full episode. We're going to do proper episodes after this one.
We should have probably covered that at the beginning. We'll put it in the description.
Yeah. Andy and Craig talk shit.
But yeah, I think something we will cover is why we are interested in this, not just through passing interest through films and books and things like that, media, but personal experience. Now, before we go into that, I feel like we should probably do a bit of disclosure as to whether we are believers or not.
Oh, we're getting straight in there. I thought we were going to wait till like episode 100 before we do the big reveal, but
I don't know. I think it gives a little bit of flavour to our personal stories, but it's up to you.
Yeah, okay.
You can always cut this out if you want.
No, it's fine. So, I don't know. I have a difficult relationship with it, I guess, because I went from being full-on believer to going full-on down the Derren Brown route, where there's an explanation for everything, and so then you start reading about like Houdini and how Houdini used to prove that spiritualism was wrong, and going down that route. And I did a complete U-turn, but I've had enough paranormal experiences that I probably should believe. But I also think that most of them can be explained some other way. So yeah, it's complicated.
See, this would be a lot easier if we had this like Mulder and Scully thing going on, where one of us was a believer and one wasn't. You know, I made the X-Files reference, so you'd get it. But you know, I'm kind of in the same boat myself personally. I've had experiences I can't really put an explanation to. I was a believer to the point I wasn't a religious child, but I did let things like concepts of the afterlife and hell and things like that kind of scared me as a kid. Then I was kind of a very edgy atheist kind of teenager that kind of loathed anything that was not explainable by science, thinking, you know, it was all explainable, it was just made up fairy tales. And then I think I sort of came to a place where I thought, you know, fairy tales are actually pretty cool. And thinking back on some of these experiences I had, I'm still overall, I err on skepticism, but I've definitely had some things happen that I can't put a full explanation to. And I think I'm a bit more open-minded than I was maybe 10 years ago.
I think people have like an obsession. Well, some people, not all people, an obsession with being scared and like ghost stories, and like there's something that draws not everybody, but quite a few people are drawn into it. Like for some reason, we like being scared.
It's one of those things, a bit like a roller coaster, isn't it? You know, it's measured scared. It's a story. There's no immediate threat in front of you, but there's a potential it's out there. Just like you're on a top of a big roller coaster, just about to go down that dip, and you know it's safe. You know, lots of people ride it, but at the end of the day, you've still got that in front of you and that fear in front of you. And I think it's kind of a similar thing, you know. And I think some people are more susceptible to it than others. But yeah, we do like being scared. You know, it's a measured level of scaredness, I think.
Yeah, I guess that's why people like horror movies. It's sort of you're scared for an hour and a half, 2 hours, or probably 3 hours now. But
Yeah.
after that, it's kind of done, I guess.
I mean, yeah, exactly. A good horror movie, of course, especially if you are someone that does get affected by them, it might scare you for the rest of the night. You might leave the light on for a few nights if that's your thing. I was fairly desensitized to them at an early age, but every now and then I'll watch a film where I'm like, I'm just gonna check under the bed one more time. I'm just gonna leave this light on.
I was terrified by those films as a kid. I don't know why I watched them.
It's
Child's Play is another one that comes to mind. I was
Wow.
terrified of anything that might come to life and kill me.
So I had a phase of that. Talking about personal experiences here, I had a phase where I was convinced bad things were going to come and get me in the night. And after
They are. They're coming.
After my dad had his rounds of scaring me, pretending to be the bad things in the night that's coming to get me. He then, which is very sweet of him, lined up all my Transformers toys and said they'd protect me. They'd come to life and protect me. I don't know what 8-inch tall Optimus Prime would have done, but it was the thought that counted.
Yeah. So should we get into selling some personal anecdotes? Because we've, I think, mentioned them a couple of times now.
I think we should. I think my Optimus Prime story wasn't good enough. Yeah, sure thing.
Go on, give us a personal anecdote of something you've experienced that maybe you can't explain, or maybe you can. I don't know.
I've got a couple I might save for future podcasts, actually, where it's a relevant subject, but something that got to me a little bit in my later life. So when I wasn't as susceptible to this sort of thing, or so I thought. I was in Wales. I was doing a flint knapping course, I think, with my partner, and we'd gone for a walk around a local town. And the night before, I woke up at 6 in the morning. It was about 5 or 6 in the morning. I woke up with a tremendous chest pain, to the point I honestly thought I was having a heart attack or something, And so I was feeling a bit shaky that day anyway. But yeah, it just hit me, and I honestly just thought, am I going to die? I didn't. It turned out. So I went for a walk around this town, and my phone started buzzing, and I take my phone out of my pocket. I look at the phone, and I've got these texts, these missed calls, these texts saying, "Can you call?" And then another text from my dad saying my grandfather had passed away. Now, of course, I called. I'm very upset. I get chatting about it, and it turns out the heart attack that he had was more or less. So I remember looking at my phone when I was having these chest pains the night before, and it turns out my granddad had his heart attacks pretty much exactly when I woke up. At about, I think the worst of them started. He was having chest pains, and then the worst of them started at around. It was something like 6:18 or 6:20 or something, which is pretty much when I was up looking at my phone, thinking, "Oh God, what's going on with me?" Anyway, fast forward a couple of days. I'm back home. I'm chatting to my dad, and he tells me he was out. He had to go to work. He took my mum to the hospital, but he couldn't get out of work. So he said, "Yeah, I'll come back as soon as possible." He drove off. He was driving along, and I think it was about 9 o'clock in the morning or something, around 9 o'clock in the morning. And he was driving through London, and he got the most overwhelming smell of hospital, that hospital detergent smell that they wash all the hallways, wash everything down with. It was that smell. He got overwhelmingly, and it turned out it was at the moment they pronounced him dead. So I got this chest pain in the morning, exactly when he started having his heart attacks. My dad got the hospital smell exactly when he died, like within minutes of each other, sort of the events happening. And that was, again, I might have slept wrong. I might have had indigestion. He might have just got a weird whiff through but it was just seemed a little bit too much of a weird coincidence, both of us experiencing those things on the same day when my granddad died and those lining up. And that kind of threw me a little bit. That I was like, okay, that is really weird, you know?
Yeah. But still not a believer. You're still like,
I mean, again, you heard me just rationalize it though with like my indigestion and stuff. So, you know.
Yeah, that's fair.
But again, it made me more open to it.
Yeah.
What about you?
I mean, I've got a really short story, but kind of because you mentioned smell, something came to mind. It was after my mum passed away, which is quite some time ago. 23 years ago, my mum passed away, and we were sorting through her cupboards. One important factor here, actually, I should have said, is that she was a huge tea drinker. I don't think I ever really saw her drink alcohol. It was tea all the time, just like yourself, Andy.
I can respect that.
Yeah.
Big up your mum.
Always one on the go. Like if it had gone cold, go and get a fresh one. It was just constant supply of tea. So anyway, she dies and we're sorting through her cupboard, and we get this distinct smell of tea.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's like mum's here with us. And then we keep going through the cupboard and we find a bin bag literally full of tea bags. So, yeah, we thought there was a thing, and yeah.
You know, if I was you, I would have really, if you could have done, I'd have just hidden it. I don't know, it's a bin bag, you can't really hide it, but like, you know, just got this family legend going.
Yeah. I'm not even sure where the tea bags would have come from or why they were in a bin bag in the bedroom cupboard.
But she just got lying in bed drinking her tea, taking the bag out and splat down into
they weren't used. No, these were fresh.
It's in case she needed a cup of tea in the bedroom, I guess, and didn't want to go out to the kitchen to get one. Little bedside kettle, you know.
Yeah, so that's my obviously not quite so serious story. Do you want me to tell a serious story? I mean, whilst
you can do a serious one if
kind
you
of
like.
serious one, didn't you? But
I feel like we, you know, having a bit of content on the first episode for weird stuff's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, because you mentioned sleep paralysis already, and I'm interested to see where you go with that one.
Okay.
And to me, it's kind of linked with, do you know exploding head syndrome?
You have to explain that one to me, actually. I don't think I've heard that one.
We'll stick a pin in that one and we'll come back to it, because I think they're probably similar things. Because they're fairly brief stories, but shortly before my mum passed away, there was actually a few people in my family that experienced sleep paralysis, and I was one of them. And I didn't know what it was at the time, never heard of it, been 17, hadn't come across it. So it is absolutely terrifying. I woke up feeling like I couldn't move my head. I was trying to shout for help, couldn't do that either. I couldn't move my arms. It just felt like someone was sat on my chest, pinning me to the bed. And it was daylight, like I could see it was the sun shining through the window, but it was still absolutely terrifying. And then out of nowhere, I could suddenly just move again. Now I know scientifically what sleep paralysis is. I'm not a believer in that, but at the time, there were all these paranormal explanations that sort of went around, and as I say, it happened to a few people in my family around the same time. Yeah, it's weird. But I had one that happened. When was it? Back in August. So we were in, I think, the Netherlands. We'd driven up to Norway and back, and I had it happen then. But because I knew what sleep paralysis was, I didn't get someone sat on me. I was just like, oh, this is sleep paralysis. This is kind of annoying. Like, this will pass in a minute. It didn't faze me at all that time.
Yeah. So it has happened to me before a couple of times as well. When I was a kid, there was something falling towards me in my room in my nightmare, and I had a waking nightmare sleep paralysis, which sucked. That was that wasn't good. And luckily, my brain reasoned at the time it was still a dream. So I managed to sort of get over that, but this sort of like horrible alien thing was crawling to me, and I like in my room, and I couldn't move. And then I kind of realized later it was sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
But more recently, I was crashing on a friend's sofa a few years ago, and I woke up again with sleep paralysis. I couldn't move, but I'd been having a nightmare again about this figure, and it was just this. I don't know how to explain it really. Just this encroaching darkness sort of figure that was coming towards me and like looming over me with ill like intent, and it's very like sort of almost demonic, and I couldn't move, and I was, even though I knew it was sleep paralysis, I knew, like, I was reasoning myself, this is what happens, this is sleep paralysis, because I knew I was on the sofa. If I wasn't dreaming, I wouldn't be on the, if I was, if I was still dreaming, I wouldn't be on the sofa. If I wasn't dreaming, I'd be moving. But I'm there, like, and I'm properly wedged in, like, facing against the back of the sofa. I turned over, and I just felt this presence, like, there. And it was, even though I knew what it was still terrifying. It was hard to bite that down, and just say, no, that's not real. And eventually, I don't know if you experienced this, and you strain to move, and like you feel like you move a little bit, but you can barely move. Like it's a little shuffle of your arm or something, or a flick of your foot, but that's all you can do. And then eventually I was like, okay, I can move now. But yeah, that's, even with full knowledge of what it is, I think that is still one of those terrifying things in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, my movement was a bit more sudden. I couldn't even move at all, and then suddenly I could move.
Oh, wow, okay.
I say it was in broad daylight, and it was still terrifying. But the second time, I was just not fazed by it.
I feel like we could do a whole episode on dreams. Actually, I think there's a lot of folklore and a lot of horror stories, a lot of stories about people's dreams kind of crossing over into real life. And, I think for a rational basis of it, I think things like sleepwalking and sleep paralysis tie into that.
I've got some vivid dreams, because you only ever really remember like the really vivid stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple that instantly, as soon as you mentioned dreams, I'm like, I know what we're doing.
Nice.
Yeah.
We'll put a pin in that one, but yeah, that's
so exploding head syndrome. You said you hadn't come across it.
No.
I'm not going to get too scientific with it, but essentially it's just like you wake up suddenly and you hear a bang.
Oh,
but it's an internal thing. It's not a real bang. But where this gets weird is in our last house, it happened to me, but at the same time, it happened to Emma.
Really? Exactly the same time?
We both went, what the fuck was that? And it was like someone had gone from, we long story short is we had trouble with some neighbours, and so we used to sleep in the small box room rather than the big room. And the dog used to sleep in the big room because he's a snorer, so we used to just chuck him in the other room. You shut the door. But it was like someone had gone up to the other door and gone bang on the door. Like we both knew it came from that room at the same time.
But it didn't disturb the dog?
Nope.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
See, my rational, I'd say, are you sure it wasn't just a bang? But
it could have been that somehow got into our dreams and we both imagined it was from that door. Would be the rational side to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that. Now you mention that has happened to me. I wake up and just think I've heard a loud noise, but I haven't. Like, I remember staying my place before last. It was in Wyrd, and I swore someone was banging on the wall behind me. I assumed I was snoring really loudly and they were telling me off. But my girlfriend at the time was next to me, and she was like, well, you didn't wake me up, so it can't have been that bad, Yeah. But I could have swore they shouted and banged on the wall.
So your girlfriend didn't hear the bang?
Nope.
So just you?
Yeah, but I woke her up by literally jolting awake and sitting up. Sort of you when it happens, as you know, you're alert, aren't you? Straight away, you're alert afterwards. So yeah, weird stuff, and they've got no explanation for it.
I think there is a scientific explanation for what happens, but yeah,
that's not
essentially it's
I want it to be
I should have.
bangs.
I didn't think to like make notes on exploding head syndrome, but
That's all
'cause
right.
it's come up naturally in the conversation.
That's-
So
Just
maybe we'll cover that at some point when we do like
do
dreams and
better
sleep.
do better in the future. That's all, you know.
Yes.
Notes.
Next time I'll predict what you're going to say.
Yeah, no, that I know what you're talking about. I never heard that term, but what grim term for exploding head syndrome, not phantom bang syndrome. You know, it's
right. Go on, let's do some on the ground research. All right, I'm going to Google it now.
All right.
And see what comes up. Let's not pretend we don't have Google. Come on.
No, come on Wyrd Wessex. We pore over dusty tomes. We
I'm
get
going to the
out.
yeah. I've opened the old book of Wikipedia.
You blow the dust off it first, like some old sage, like, you know.
Oh, and it says it's not to be confused with the album by the band The Telescopes, just in case you.
Now I feel better. You know, I was getting them confused.
All right. I'll just read it rather than reading it and then reading it out loud. So, exploding head syndrome is an abnormal sensory perception during sleep in which a person experiences auditory hallucinations that are loud and of short duration when falling asleep or waking up. The noise may be frightening, typically occurs only occasionally, and is not a serious health concern. People may also experience a flash of light. Pain is typically absent. The cause is unknown. Potential organic explanations that have been investigated but ruled out include ear problems, temporal lobe seizure, nerve dysfunction, or specific genetic changes. Potential risk includes psychological stress. It is classified as a sleep disorder or headache disorder, and people often go undiagnosed. He goes on for quite a while, but
look at that! I've just diagnosed myself through Wikipedia. That's a good idea, I'm sure.
The cause is unknown. A number of hypotheses have been put forth, with the most common being dysfunction of the reticular formation in the brainstem responsible for transition between wake and sleep.
There you go. Our heads are wrong.
Yeah, there's a whole list underneath about like minor seizures and other stuff. But then how do you explain two of us having it at the same time? That's the only thing I couldn't explain. If it was just me, like I've had it happen a few times, but to have it happen to someone sleeping next to you as well.
I'm imagining your dog doing the bang and then like sitting there quietly doing the Muttley laugh.
He runs off and goes. Yeah.
So essentially I was right when saying there was no explanation. That's
I'll cut to that and you'll just go, there's no explanation. Yep.
So that kind of covers a bit of personal experience, I guess, that we've had. Do you think any of those? So your experiences that you've given so far have actually been all rational ones, all ones that you've explained away, bar maybe having one at the same time as your wife.
Yeah. Okay. So you want me to think of something that's less rationalized?
Have you got one that you can't explain?
All right. So there's one. I just realised that I'm burning myself on my candle.
Soon Craig will be a ghost story.
It's just like, can I think of a story? No, I'm just going to set fire to myself. Yeah. There's a couple of things connected with where we live now. And one happened just outside this building. I mean, there's a window here that you can't see. But shortly after we moved in, doing the typical clearing up of the garden in the winter and burning the rubbish, because I'm British and that's what we do. Burn your garden rubbish. With some cider, I'm drinking my cider.
That is very Wessex. That's very Wiltshire.
Got to drink up my cider. And so this is, I suppose, slightly a two-part story, really. The first one was that I was stood by the fire drinking my cider, and I saw, when you see someone move and you're not expecting them, that you jump and like your heart rate goes up. So that happened, and I saw someone run across the garden. But in the instant that I spotted them, they disappeared. anyway, so the next day I realized at the time I was wearing a Thor's hammer and I'd lost it. So obviously, first thing I do is go out to the garden and try and find it.
Yeah.
And the place where I found it was the place where the shadow person disappeared.
Wow. Okay.
So I can't explain that one. And it was like someone just bolted across the garden but disappeared. And it was only, I don't know, probably 6 foot from where I was. It wasn't far away. And there was just that sudden movement that I went,
Yeah.
the fuck? And then gone.
See, I was going to say, I know when you're tired, you sometimes see things like that. That's something I get sometimes from tired. I'll say, or maybe I'm just haunted by lots of shadow people. I don't know. But
I thought you just meant me then. Look, I know when you're tired.
I know when you're tired, he gets like this. No, I know when you're tired, your brain does play tricks on you a little bit more like that. It's like, when you're staring into a tree line late at night or something and you're by yourself and you stare too long, if you're a bit knackered, you'll see those trees move. You'll see things there. But yeah, no, that's the Thor's hammer bit, especially. That's quite a. You said it was a two-parter.
Yeah. So when we first moved here, Ocean was almost 3. So the other thing I should say, so this is an 1850s cottage. It used to be part of a coaching house, so it's got some history to it. But we were in bed. I don't even think we'd been in the house a week. And we're in bed and Ocean climbs into bed in the morning. It's the winter time. It's probably around now, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's like our house anniversary this week. And Ocean just looks at me and she looks across the bedroom and she says, Daddy, why is there a shadow with a hat on over there?
It's always creepier when kids say it, man.
Well, within a couple of days of that, we had the van parked out the front and Emma was sat in the van with Ocean and I was looking the front door. And when I got in the van, Emma's like, yeah. Ocean just said to me, the shadow with the hat's looking out the bedroom window at us.
There is just something creepier about it when it's a child saying it, you know.
I should have cut and got Ocean to do like a little voiceover.
Yeah, next time, man. Next time.
Yeah, but then there is one of my neighbours has seen a Victorian gentleman with a top hat.
Yeah.
Before, and they've smelt cigars in their house after they've been away and come home.
Ah.
And they don't smoke or anything. So there's something that goes on around here.
Okay. Ah, nice.
Is that better for you? Is that more?
Absolutely. And, you had all the ingredients of a classic ghost story there, not only the, creepy sentence uttered by a child, which makes it even more creepy, but you had the house anniversary, it was like it was 5 years ago to this very night, I
mean, it was 4, but you weren't to know.
No, I'm rounding up. So... Yeah. Should we talk a little bit about what we're planning in the future? What sort of things we're going to be covering?
Yeah. So probably one thing I want to cover quite soon actually is the Penhill poltergeist.
Oh yes.
It's a little known story. It did make it onto the BBC some years ago, and I need to do some more research, and I'm hoping to even possibly track down the people that were involved.
Nice.
There are 2 stories I found on a council estate in Swindon, near where I used to live, in an area called Penhill. And it does have a reputation. It is a bit rough. Sorry if you're from Penhill and you're listening to this. But that aside, there are 2 stories of people that experienced the poltergeist. And one of them I read even had the point where the council sent someone round to deal with the poltergeist, which I found intriguing. But I can't find that. Yeah. So I can't find, because it was on the BBC, but it was some years ago. I'm assuming it's been recorded over. They used to record over everything.
Yeah.
Because they only had so many tapes, didn't they?
Yeah.
So they just
so all these lost Doctor Who episodes and the like,
Yeah. So I don't know that from what I can find, it doesn't exist anymore. But I'm thinking that the people involved would probably be 60s, 70s. I mean, there involves a 2-year-old boy, so he's probably in his 50s now.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to see whether their opinions have changed in that 50 years, or whether they still believe.
We'll have to get.
But then, yeah, and the fact that there are 2 cases on the same estate, and so I think we should do an episode looking into that side of things. And I think at the time it might have even been a new estate, so whether it's like built on a burial ground, or or whether it's just settling ground, or I think we should look at that side of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, is there anything you want to cover?
There's a lot of. I love fairy folklore. I love folklore that sort of drifts into the realm of spooky and mysterious, but is rooted in ancient folklore. So there are a lot of fairy stories. There are a lot of strange lights which would now be attributed to UFOs, which we may cover in its. I imagine we're going to cover at some point.
Oh, we're going to have to, yeah.
Given sort of some of the things that Wiltshire is famous for in that regard, but you get a lot of these stories of strange lights in the sky, like going back to the 1800s, and back then they were attributed. It wasn't it wasn't spacemen. It wasn't it wasn't fair. It was fairies. It was more seen as a supernatural rather than something. A little bit more.
Well, at times it was witches too, wasn't it?
It was witches, yeah. At times it's been witches as well, yeah.
It sort of shifts depending on what is the current kind of.
What's the current feeling? What's the fascination? What's the
yeah. It's like the idea of little grey men don't appear until fairly recently.
Yeah.
And then they just become the thing that people are abducted by aliens. It's always little green men.
Yeah, was that Roswell started that? Was it?
Roswell. What year is Roswell? It's got to be one of the first, but there's
70s.
I should know as well.
I was going to say that's more your realm,
But I was thinking more. I think Betty and Barney might have been the first, and not the Flintstones. But
I was thinking the Flintstones, man. I'm not gonna lie.
So you don't know, but there's Betty and Barney Hill, I think was their last name.
That rings a bell.
They were, I think, one of the first to experience. But I think there's some whiff of BS around that story. But yeah,
I'd like to look at various monsters as well, not just sort of Loch Ness monster or anything like that. We've got a lot of monsters in folklore, some which are still seen, some which have passed into folklore, like the Bistern Dragon, things like that, which is sort of New Forest based, so Hampshire way. And barrows. I love barrow folklore.
Oh, we've got to do barrows. We've
got ideas for barrows.
I mean, spoiler alert. So the actual first episode after this, we're doing black dogs. And I have some barrow stuff involved with black dogs.
Oh, nice. None of mine involve barrows, so I'll look forward to hearing those.
Yeah.
Another regular segment to these podcasts is going to be weird news.
Weird news.
So while a lot of what we're focusing on is based in Wessex, and as weird as Wessex is, there's not always the weirdest of news in Wessex every week or every month. I doubt we're going to be posting this up every week. But
it's hard enough pinning you down for the first episode.
This is true. So we're going to be going further afield for that. So essentially, we're going to be looking in the news for all things weird, mysterious, strange, just peculiar. And we're each going to be bringing something to the table for every episode in that week or that month's weird news.
Yeah. And then sort of discuss it and maybe give our opinions on it. And so we'll start off for this first episode. I guess we're going to end on.
I think so.
On our weird news.
Yeah, we'll end on our weird news.
But we'll probably include it at the end of every episode.
Yeah.
If we can find something. There's usually something in the news.
We'll find something. We're setting ourselves up to do it now. We've got to find something.
Yeah. So do you want to go first. I'm kind of worried that you're going to have the same story as me.
See, mine isn't that strange, dark, or mysterious.
Oh, neither's mine.
Does it involve London?
No.
All right. So this is a fairly light-hearted one. But in London, I believe it's the Millennium Bridge. So they're doing maintenance on it at the moment, and a bunch of people noticed something a bit weird. There's a straw bale dangling underneath it,
right?
And no one knew what this was about. There's just this straw bale's just appeared dangling there. Like, what a weird thing to leave. Turns out it was absolutely deliberate. It was left there by the people doing maintenance on the bridge. Because according to an ancient bylaw, so they say, it's not actually an ancient bylaw, it comes in at 2012, but they base...
That's ancient enough for me.
That's it. They base it on an old tradition that a bridge in London, if it was below a certain height, you have to mark it off at night with a white light, a white lamp, and in the daytime, a dangling straw bale to alert any ships approaching that it's under a certain height and they can't go under or they need to drop mast. Now, as due to their, they just incorporated it into the bylaw when they wrote it in 2012. So yeah, you've got this for legal reasons. You have to have this straw bale because of the maintenance work going on in it. The workers are underneath the bridge, and that lowers the passing gap between the water and the bottom of the bridge. So you have to dangle a straw bale under it because it's gone under a certain height. And I just thought that was a lovely bit of weird news myself, because it's just I'd like to do an episode on it, maybe a more light-hearted one, admittedly, but there are some really weird bylaws still around, like when you can't put rugs out in London and things like that, you know. So yeah, that's my bit of weird news.
Oh man, so I had 3.
You had 3. I'm saving 3 some. I'm saving some.
Yeah, well, I had 3 to choose between, but this is going out on Halloween. So I've gone with Minnesota man's 2,749-pound pumpkin sets world record.
Brilliant. Go
on. Yeah, it just says horticultural teacher Travis Genga brings gourd dubbed Michael Jordan across country for a California contest. Do you want me to read the article, or are you happy?
No, that's fantastic. I mean, for anyone watching this, maybe we can throw up a picture of that pumpkin if there's one.
It's pretty impressive. It looks kind of gross. I mean, I wouldn't eat it. Yeah, so it was the 50th World Championship Pumpkin Weigh-Off in Half Moon Bay, California. It beat the previous record set in 2021 by 47 pounds. This pumpkin is called Michael Jordan because it's the year 2023 and he's the greatest basketball player of all time, Geiger told KSTP-TV in Minnesota. In brackets, it does say, and I'm glad it does because I was wondering what the hell they're on about, Jordan's jersey number was 23.
Ah, I see. That straight off my head, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, I know who he is. He was that actor in Space Jam.
I don't know if you call him an actor in Space Jam, but he was in Space Jam.
I know who Michael Jordan is.
Yeah. Michael Jordan grew into an enormous, lumpy orange pumpkin. I think they mean the pumpkin this time.
There's a horror story for yourself.
Equivalent to around 2,110 basketballs or 275 jack-o'-lanterns. For some reason, it tells you.
Americans measure things in the weirdest ways, you know.
I mean, they compare it to the fact that Michael Jordan, the basketball player, weighs 216 pounds during his NBA career, just in case you weren't sure.
They're really fixing on Michael Jordan for this thing, aren't they?
He spent about $15,000 to feed and care for Michael Jordan as the pumpkin ballooned in his backyard, and he carefully drove it to California from Minnesota last weekend. He's
wow.
He's a landscape horticultural teacher. Anyway, yeah, it's probably boring now, but I like the headline. It fits in. It's Halloween. I've got some weirder stuff for next time.
All right,
But-
I'm gonna up my game for the next one for Halloween. You know, it's 2 of these coming out on Halloween, so my next one will be weirder.
All right. So I think we're going to leave it there. And as I say, the next episode, which will go out on the same day as this one, is going to be on black dogs.
Yeah, look forward to that.
We never decided who was closing the podcast. Go on.
We've been weird. No, hang on. No, I don't know. We're gonna have to edit this bit, or don't edit it. Fuck it.
I'm not going to edit.
This is the first one. Stay weird. That's a nice cheesy one, isn't it? I'm not using that.
Stay word.
So yeah, no, thanks for listening, guys. And we will see you next time on Wyrd Wessex.
Bye.